Good to see you, Karazes, Tablet Pencil, Jack, K Hadao. Thanks for hanging out here so early. We're going to get started right after these ads. Thanks for hanging out. I'm really excited about today. Big thanks to Risky Biscuit and Polygon as well. We're going to dive into the full introductions here in just a little bit. But thanks everyone for being here. Oh, do you feel it? Can you feel it? Are we so excited? I'm tremendously excited. It's time! Holy cannoli! This is so great. I am so excited to be here. Thank you so much for being with us. All of you deeply appreciate it. Thank you so much for hanging out. Zaft, K Hadao, Polygon Pilgrimage, Karazest, Risky Biscuit, Daniel Pancake, K Hadao, Tablet Pencil, all of you lurking in the shadows. Daniel Pancake, hello. So good to see you all here. We are going to pause the music because this is going to go into a chronicled VOD. We don't want anything to make it so that people can't hear our wonderful debaters. Can't do the Fez until Toolbox comes in, but I'll throw on a beanie. I'll be the cool professor, you know. I'll be like my English professor in college who would stroll in with cowboy boots and then just lay across his desk and be like, okay, let's talk about Shakespeare. Have I always had a mustache? Yes, absolutely. Everyone had a hat. Oh dear. Uh, okay, great. Great discussions already. So, here's what we're going to do. We have a format here today. I promised our debaters that we would take 1 hour with this. So we are on a tight schedule to keep. So without further ado, I am going to leave it to them to introduce themselves. First up, we have Risky Biscuit Games. Both of these are lovely Twitch streamers as well, by the way. And I should mention as well beforehand, thank you, Blades. I should mention beforehand, this is a new thing we're trying. The goal of this debate is not to win. The goal of this debate is to help all of us learn more about each other, learn more about maybe different viewpoints, and, maybe come out with something we didn't have beforehand. So, these two lovely individuals, Risky Biscuit and Polygon Pilgrimage, they have graciously acquiesced to be our first experiment subjects here today to debate with. They are going to be debating things that they may or may not actually believe, but they have agreed to take positions on things. So, thank you to both of you for being willing to fight for something and talk about it and create a more cultured, sort of learning atmosphere. So, without further ado, Risky Biscuit Games, who are you? What are you up to? Where can people find you?
Hey, yeah, thanks. So yeah, I'm Risky Biscuit Games. I'm a Unity developer that's been working in the industry for about 10 years now. I'm currently streaming and working on a game in my spare time called SOS Forgotten Planet, which is a horror game where you learn Morse code. So you're navigating in a sci-fi environment, and you have to use Morse code to open doors and decipher chests and stuff like that. So the main mechanic is with Morse code, and you have to survive monsters that are trying to kill you. But there's also a lot of story elements and RPG mechanics, or not necessarily RPG, but like progression mechanics in there as well. So lots of good stuff, fun stuff. You should check it out. It's currently on Steam as a demo. And yeah, that's basically all about me. You can find me obviously at Twitch at Risky Biscuit Games.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Risky. Appreciate having you here. Thank you. Next up, we have the Polygon Pilgrimage. Polygon, you want to give us a little bit about yourself? What are you up to? Where can people find you?
Yeah, thanks again for having me. Yeah, so my name is Matt, also known as Polygon for short. I started the Polygon Pilgrimage about 10 or 15 years ago now, where I just give back to the community by teaching what I've been learning. So I'm not an expert, but just my experience. And then together we all grow and become better artists every day. I'm a 3D artist by trade, game dev, about 20 years now. I think next year will be my 20th year in this space. And I'm a self taught programmer, but mostly an artist. And I do have a bachelor's of fine arts in multimedia arts and animation. I went to art school. I'm a super nerd in that regard, and I've just been enjoying making games and sharing this space with fellow developers. I am currently working on a adventure platformer called Building Friends, and it's sort of a cutesy little thing, like a Pixar type world where construction equipment has come to life to help finish building a house together in just 7 days. So it's very cute, very Banjo Kazooie. It's kind of leaning towards being good for kids. So we'll also be doing a kids book along with it. So you can buy the kids book on Amazon. So why not just kind of take the assets and do more with it? And yeah, so that's pretty much me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. I didn't know that about the children's book. That's incredibly adorable. Cool. Well, Risky Biscuit, Polygon Pilgrimage, thank you so much for being here today. For those of you who are in the chat, we're going to be kind of responding, kind of a little bit not. We're going to respect the time that we're giving to these individuals coming onto the show. Opayaya, thank you so much for the follow. We have a poll going on right now. I'd love everyone that's here to fill out, if they can, where do you stand right now on AI art and games? We're going to do the poll right now. We're going to run it again at the end. You don't have to change your opinion, but the big takeaway we're going to take out of all of this is I'm going to ask everyone in chat, what are things that you learned during this debate? It doesn't have to be something that changed your position, but just what's something that you learned? That's the goal of what we're looking for here today. So keep that in mind. Be ready to type that in at the end of the debate. Love to hear about what everyone is thinking. And with that, let's go ahead and dive into our topic. Is there a place for AI art in games? Is this something that is morally acceptable for us as a game dev community and as gaming communities? There's obviously a lot of controversy surrounding this subject right now. It does not take a whole lot of searching to find lots of really strong, powerful opinions, right? In fact, there are people who directly say they will not play a game that has AI art in it. So, we're going to try and have some more nuanced discussion around the subject right now, beyond just Reddit exchanges of exclamation points and slurs. I'm deeply excited about this. I think both of the our contestants, that's not right, our participants here are going to bring some really interesting things to the table. So with that, we're going to start off. Polygon Pilgrimage is taking the side of no, that this is something we should shy away from. AI art should not be used in games. Risky Biscuit is taking the affirmative side, that yes, there is a place for it. We're going to give 5 minutes to each of them for their opening thoughts here. After that, I am going to ask some questions to them, and then we'll be taking questions from chat as well. So after my 15-minute block of questions to both of them is done, we'll be pulling questions from chat and throwing them to our debaters here to gather their thoughts on what people are asking in chat. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and get started here. Polygon Pilgrimage, you kick us off.
All right, will do. So thanks again. And yeah, so I want to start off by making a clarification. Since we're going to be talking about very specific technical things, I'm going to split some hairs here, so forgive me. But when we talk about AI art, what we're really talking about is large language models. So it's not true AI. AI, in the true sense of what we see in sci-fi and fantasy, is sentient, and it has the ability to make decisions, make changes to itself, and adapt. Whereas what we're actually looking at here is large language models. So it's really just fancy instructions over and over again. So if you look at the pure definition of art, and I say this with passion because I am an artist. I'm a traditionally trained artist, and now a digital artist, and now a programmer and a game developer. But the definition of art is that it is the expression or application of human creative skill and imagination. So yes, that's pulled from the actual definition. It has the word human in it. So you need a person to be involved. And as we just covered, art has expression, it has intention, it has heart, emotion, and purpose. It's been crafted and holds value in part due to the fact that the skill and the time required to create it. So if you're just giving instructions and say, go do it for me, you're not really involved. You gave direction. You're no more than a manager. If you think back to the times of the old masters, when they were literally inventing new forms of painting, and then they would have patrons, and the patrons would say, I require this piece of art to be commissioned from you. Go do this. When they get that painting back and it's a masterpiece, some of the best skill human beings have ever put to canvas, to sculpture, and they hang it in their home and they show it to their guests, they never say I did this, because they didn't do it. They gave direction and it was done on their behalf. So that's not really art, and from their perspective, it is art that they were given and then put up. So the artist was the one, blood, sweat, and tears, invention, creativity, skill, hard work, blisters, to create something for them. So that is art. Now, I do believe that there is a place for AI generated imagery to be used as a part of the creation of something. So AI art is basically computer assisted collaging. Really, that's all it's doing. Is it's going through and saying, let's take little things, and you said you want something like this, and I put these things together until it looks kind of like it, and it's learned through repetition. But I think that there is a use for it as a part. So you have something like a chair is made from wood and leather and nails and math and passion and an artistic eye. But if you just take a piece of wood and set it down and say, here, I made you a chair, no, that's not a chair, that's wood. So I don't believe that if you use AI art to generate something and then turn around and say, look, I made this, I say, no, you didn't. You typed in some commands, you typed in some direction and some desires into a prompt, and an algorithm did the rest. So that's not really art by definition. And also, there have been several instances of art challenges, art competitions, where when a competition entry has been discovered that it was made with AI art. Now, there are something, it can generate some things really, really well to the point where it's hard to tell. But in every case that I found, every time it was discovered that this thing was generated by a computer, that's been disqualified. So why would you disqualify something from a competition unless it isn't truly what it was meant to be? So it's not really art. Now, I use AI generated stuff all the time. I use almost every day to give me a basis to which then go off of and say, I'm trying to come up with a list of things or help me categorize things. And it does that really, really well. And sometimes I do use the imagery to say, let me generate, a couple of ideas to get like a mood board going. But that is acted as a springboard for my creativity to then take over and create the final piece. I never take something and just directly just slap it into the thing and say, there you go, I did a great job, because that's not really what it's about. Plus, it's fun to do it yourself, and that's part of the process. So I really enjoy that a lot, and I hope that you guys feel the same way. Or if you don't, that's fine. Let's talk about it. Let's figure out some of the things that can we find the nuance? Can we find the intermediary? I don't have a whole lot to say on the legality side. I think that's a whole nother topic of discussion, but just whether or not you can actually call it art and take ownership of it. No, I don't think tappity tap, go, it's done. I think that you need to take that and put some effort into it and take your creativity and bend it some way, augment it. Everything new, everything old is new again, right? We take things and kind of recombine them, and that's fine. Take pieces and then build something out of those pieces. But as a whole piece on its own, no, you weren't really involved in that. And that's my take.
Perfect. Thank you so much. 13 seconds on the clock. Well done. Starting us off on a great basis. Best debate we're going to watch all week long. I guarantee it. All right, perfect. Thank you so much for your remarks, Polygon. We're going to kick in now with Risky Biscuit. Risky Biscuit, is there a place for AI art in games?
All right, so I got a lot written down here, so we'll see how much I can get done in 5 minutes. So the question again is about using the morality regarding art in games. It's not necessarily whether it looks good or it's practical or people generally will just hate on you for using it. It's whether or not there's a universal morality or an ethic to using AI art in video games. And I fundamentally think that we should. I'm not here to say that AI art is some like virtuous thing, that if you use it, you're better than people. But rather it's kind of like a neutral thing. Like, doesn't matter. It's not something that makes you horrible. And that by that definition, it is not immoral. The three core arguments I often see against the stance of AI art is these three. So AI art's impacts on artists' jobs. 2, AI art's training databases are using art without consent. And 3, as Polygon kind of alluded to earlier, it's not art. So on the AI hurting artists' jobs, it's probably true that most art jobs will be replaced by AI. This is not immoral. History is full of examples of technology replacing jobs. Should Uber not exist because it harms taxi drivers? Mechanical looms replaced weavers. Cars replaced carriage drivers. We are better for those inventions to have happened because they've led to a better quality of life and more things in general, a more prosperous human society. The problem with this argument is it's only looking at the harm. You aren't being presented the numerous jobs that can be created from art. Think of the first-time game developer who isn't very good at art or just hasn't spent years practicing to be totally proficient in making something beautiful. That game designer may not even make a game because the art side is so daunting and anything they could create would just be not liked by people. AI art would result in more games being created by more people at smaller scales. This would be good for gamers and the industry at large. On AI training in databases, this is probably the best argument against it, but it's also completely nullified when we use ethically sourced databases. People have talked about these. They're probably going to happen within a few years or so, depending on how much outrage there is on them. But if we want to discuss about the unethically sized, you have to agree that AI art is okay, except for this situation, right? If we were arguing about other things, that doesn't mean you actually care about the unethically sourced database. It just means you care about the other things. And this is just your one little wedge issue that you care about. So unless you're going to agree that AI art is okay with ethically sourced databases, I don't really think this is the problem that people are actually looking at. Lastly, we're talking about it's not art. Well, art by its definition is subjective, right? When we talk about people that have duct taped a banana peel to a wall and called that art, well, we're kind of at the end of where we're needing to qualify of what's art, right? And yes, you can define it in certain ways, but in the game, and we're talking about video games, we're talking about something that conveys a world, transports you to a different landscape and to a different world and displays that in some pleasant way, typically. I mean, unless it's a scary game and then maybe it's a little unpleasant, but it's supposed to convey emotion to you, right? And so if we are having art that is made by an artist, by someone commissioned, if I commissioned an artist, Is that not my art? Can I say like, well, I commissioned an art? Well, it's almost the same as like, yeah, I got an AI to make the art, but I made it into a game and a cohesive experience that's conveying an emotion that will appeal to the people. Why is that not now something that we're calling valid? Why are we, as a platform like on Steam, saying that you have to tick a box and you may even get banned from being even on Steam if you've used AI art? Why are the people that are so against it that if you say like, hey, yeah, I use little AI art in this little section, they're not even going to buy your game anymore, because this has just been some huge issue blown up to a monstrous proportion, when we can see that this is so valuable for newer people, for growing artists, for people that are growing out in the industry. It can have such a monumental, game-changing ability to create more games, better games, and just make the industry better as a whole. And so just calling it, sitting at an ivory tower and saying, hey, it's not art. Well, it does the job. It does the thing that we want it to do. So why do we have to call that not art? And yeah, that's where I was my opening statements.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Okay. Fantastic comments from both of you. Thank you so much. I've got a bunch of questions here, a lot of interesting thoughts I would love to dive into a little bit more. I'm going to start off throwing a question over to Polygon. Sorry, let me get my overlay good. So, my first question here is the human side truly necessary for art? If people have been inspired by landscapes or natural formations throughout human history, why is that human tag necessary to quantify it as art?
That's a good question. Well, I'd say there was a comment or some of the comments I saw where people saying that humanity and effort are relevant. Well, no, because the human had to type the prompt in. It's not really AI, so it can't do it all itself. So it needs us from the crust, from the precipice, to say, what is it that you want me to create? What are the parameters? So it needs instructions from Go. You can't just have it be generating things that are interesting, that are moving, that are creative without the human input from the beginning. And then also, once the art is completed, and regardless of how it got there, once the art is completed, it's true, yes, art is in the eye of the beholder and it is subjective, right? We need to look at it and say, how do we feel about this? Does this accomplish what we wanted it to accomplish? Does it look like what we wanted it to look like? Does it convey the emotion we wanted it to convey? Things of that nature. It is judged by humans. So humans are necessary in the process entirely. So as the same debate I have with people about, they say, oh, I'm a Unity guy. People say, don't use Unity, use Unreal because it's better, blah, blah, blah. Well, just because you think it's better doesn't mean it's better. Use the tool that gets the job done for you the best that it can get done, right? So the same thing here. I do think there is a place for using these tools to create pieces of what becomes your final outlook. You say, oh, I need a good material or a good texture that says, um, I need a texture that is a marble floor with crystals growing out of the cracks between them. That's something that's never existed before. Okay, this is a great use of this tool to generate that imagery. But now I need to take it and turn it into a tileable texture, put it in a world where I have sculpted, the curvature of that path and the trees and things. So my creativity is what brings the disjoint elements together to create the art. If I just tell it, generate this thing, it sits there and nobody sees it and nobody takes it and puts intention behind it and nobody, molds it into something more than it was from this original pieces, then what's the point?
Okay. Thank you
Then
so
what's
much.
the difference between like issuing a prompt to an AI and giving an other artist that works remotely that you've never seen from like God knows where and saying, hey, this is what I want you to draw?
That's a fair point. Well, the difference is what we're debating, right? What we're defining here, not debating, sorry, is that if I put in prompts and it generates something and I say, look, I did this, that's wrong. If I hire you to do something and you do it, it is art you created, therefore it is art because it came from you. I then use it for my purposes, but I should properly credit you to say, Risky is the artist. I gave him direction to what I needed, but he went and created something himself. It wasn't a tool that just kind of did it automatically.
So couldn't you just say, hey, I used AI art? It's not my art.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Is if you do that, that's fine. I'm saying people who just hit the buttons, generate a thing, and put it online and say, "Look what I did." No, you didn't do that.
Risky Biscuit, any rebuttal on that?
I don't know, it just seems like that's more just attribution, right? Like you would be equally a dick if you hired somebody to make your art and then said it's my art, right? That's actually seems to be more the just mission. AI art wouldn't even be relevant in that conversation. That's just giving attribution to the thing that actually did the thing.
Oh yeah, I guess you're right in that regard. But also, there's the question of the intention, the effort, and the things that are um, meaningful come from the human interaction, come from applying creativity to something. So you can tell something, generate a picture of a tree, and it can do it really well because it's sourcing from other things that have come before it. So it is entirely reliant on all art that came before it, first of all, to generate the things that it's generating. Then from there, it generates something that looks like what you asked it to. Okay, great. But there was no effort, there was no intention, there was no emotion, there was no soul put into that work. So it's just, kind of soulless machine.
Okay.
Two parts on that. I don't think anyone's ever looked at a tree in a video game and said like, "Oh wow, that had so much intention and intelligence." Like, maybe there's like a specific art, big tree of Nilfheim or something. I don't know. But like your average random tree, no one's looking at that and being like, "Oh, is this a piece of art or not?" Right? They just need it to look like a tree. They need it to be part of the environment. That builds part of the cohesive experience, right? So I don't think that matters, and I don't think the time that it's spent. You're not going to go and tell everybody, hey, look at my awesome game. I spent 3 hours making that tree. You should appreciate my game, right? Like, it doesn't matter. It's a tree in a game and it looks like a forest. Um, as long as it conveys the feelings that we need it to convey, I think there's no difference between making it yourself and using AI for it.
We're going to call it there. Thank you so much. Wonderful answer, wonderful rebuttal. Risky Biscuit, over to you. Do you feel that a computer generated anything, can create something emotional for a human?
I think that's obvious. I mean, we as humans have a innate ability to anthropomorphize basically everything, right? We constantly think a car that has two headlights because it has like some sort of emotional appeal of looking like a human, just like from the vagueness of like where two headlights look like a car, right? I think it's fairly easy for a computer to make something that would have an emotional appeal to somebody.
Okay. Any rebuttal? Polygon Pilgrimage.
Well, then you get into we come back around to the idea of that art is subjective and it's in the eye of the beholder. So that it is entirely dependent on the audience therein of that. So this happens with everything is you create something and a lot of people will say, I love this, this is great. And then there's somebody who goes, oh, that's the ugliest thing I've ever seen. So it's entirely dependent upon the viewer at the end for all art, which is the problem with art. I love art. I have a degree in art. And I still, that's the issue is you can work really hard on something and create something and say, yeah, look, shouldn't you feel this? And isn't this great? And there will be people who say no, because that's just not for them. So that's an inherent issue with just art in general, or with any creative output or any visual thing, even if it's not artistic. It could just be, a straight up just we made this wall, whatever. And you look at it and people go, I like that wall or I don't like that wall. So anything people look at, they can judge and it's based upon the person. So
Okay. Perfect. Thank you so much for your thoughts. Polygon Pilgrimage. The Miles Morales Spider-Man movies the creators have explicitly come out and said, we could not have made this movie in the time frame that we did without AI assistance to create all of these weird, cool effects and everything. Do you feel that there's a difference between the effects that those animated movies leverage and an AI art piece? And if there is a difference, can you help kind of quantify it?
yeah. So like I said earlier, I don't have a problem with any automated tool to help you get the job done, right? It's a tool, it should be used as a part of the process. So the fact that they used AI to generate some things to combine some things to create different effects, whatever is fine. And that's great because it's doing what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to increase the human output by allowing us to skip kind of the tedious stuff or to do things that a person could sit down and do that. It would just take them a lot longer. So you use a tool to do it faster. That's been true for all of mankind's existence, right? A tool is designed to help us get work done faster. So that's all it is. The real issue that I take with people saying like, "Oh, I created this thing." If you just let the prompt run and then the raw output, and you say like, "This is this thing I made," and if you've ever tried to use any of the current gen AI generated tools to generate a video based upon prompts, you get a lucid dream sequence that is just beyond nightmares because it doesn't know how to do that because that's where skill, creative intention and such comes into play. So using a tool to say, take this and combine this effect or create me a giant chart of things to help me kind of process this data more quickly, that's totally fine. That's what tools are designed to use. So I think that the fact that they used it is fine. And then the rest of it was their creative output, which made it great.
Okay. Risky Biscuit, any rebuttal there?
I don't know. I think that seems fair. I don't think he's really putting anything against the AI art used there.
Fair enough. Excellent. Now, Risky Biscuit, you've talked a lot about how people don't really care about art necessarily in the instance of like a tree, right? And that this is helping to create something accessible for beginners. Do you feel that there's a space for experts in AI art? Is there a skill gap between beginning AI art and expert AI art? What do you feel that industry might look like? Let's say we took all holds free for AI, and what does that industry look like long term, in your opinion?
Long term, I don't know what 30 plus years we're going to see. I mean, no one really can predict that far, but I think in the medium to short of like 5 years, I think there's going to be a lot more people that are going to be using AI art to quicken their art flows. I don't think we are going to see less art jobs, I think, on the peripherals of like the random making like a bazillion icons or the ones that just, make textures. I think those are going to go away pretty quickly. But I think in general, in game studios, you're not going to be firing your senior artists because those guys are still going to have what we call the intentionality. They're going to be able to deliver a better product than someone just typing in prompts, right? There's lots of people that will be able to use AI art with image prompting, right? So they'll take images, they'll put them in there, they'll get the AI art to modify it a little bit with specific prompts, and then they can refine it more, and then they'll put it back in, and then they'll do more prompts, and they'll kind of refine it even more and more and more. And you'll see that in lots of posts that people have done is just, modifying, iterating on all these processes. I also think we're in ads, so I don't know how many people have just missed that, but hopefully not many.
Perfect.
That's
okay.
That's kind of my thought on it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Polygon, any rebuttal? And I will use this opportunity to get a bottle for my son. I'll be right back.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. Family first, always. Yeah, I think you're right, Risky. I think, well, that's what I was talking about. Is the human intention, the human intervention is always going to be needed to create something truly what I define as creative. Otherwise it's just prompt, follow instructions, create a thing based upon what I was told. But there's no real creativity there, other than well, there's no real creativity. But by definition, it's just I want you to make a picture of a tree, so find other pictures of trees and put them together until it looks like a tree. Follow my directions now. So I think you're right that in the future, when AI tools are already being much more prevalent all over the place, from my full-time job, anytime I put in a ticket for tech support, it's an AI thing that responds to me. So we're already seeing that perforation into our society of more and more AI because it's basically just the next level of automation, right? It's not truly AI like we discussed, but it is the large language model which helps us to automate on a higher level. Cool. So that's great. Take away the things that are tedious and menial and that sort of thing and leave the higher creativity spots alone. I'm all for that. Yes, it sucks that the people who, like you said, make the thousands of icons or do the crappy little like, hey, rotoscope this thing, and they spend hours and hours doing that. Now we have tools to do that faster. Great. So some of those jobs will go away. But in the end, you're still going to end up with one of my original points was what you need is still the human being to be involved to create something that is actually creative, that has artistic value other than taking a direction and creating a thing based upon instructions. So I think those people will be at the core and they always will be. But I think in general, on the outskirts and throughout society, I think there are instances and ways in which we can use automation to a higher level to make things easier for everyone. And I'm all for that.
Yeah, and so I would just add on to that. It's more though an efficiency argument rather than a moral argument, right? Like obviously having an artist that can steer the wheel of AI is probably going to result in a superior product, but that superior product is just a deliverable. It's not a moral defining superiority, right?
Correct. I am, for the record, I am completely against if someone uses a tool or an AI or something to generate something and say, I'm going to use this and fire an artist who works hard to do this because I feel like this can completely replace that person. I say, no, that's not true, and you shouldn't do that.
So let's extend that a little bit further, Polygon. Let's say once again, AI becomes commonplace. How do you feel that the jobs of artists will be impacted down the line?
Well, I think if we get to a point where, let's try to imagine here, a world in which AI is so incredibly prevalent, we all have like Jarvis-y type things where we just kind of speak aloud and things, very Jetsons-y, then what we define as creative outputs and creative pursuits is going to evolve and change as well. So what we define as creative then might be the case of taking those things and bending them to our will to create new things in new ways that we've never thought of before. Maybe we get to the point where it's all VR stuff, and then there's going to be even more need for that sort of thing because now you're living in like a virtual world and that sort of thing. But when we get to that point where everything has changed to a point where it's just all automated and there's just computers doing things for us, I think we would become too reliant on it. Like I'm a big technology guy. I'm like, we're having a discussion over the internet right now about game development, right? So I'm definitely interested in that space, but I think we do get a point where we're too reliant on it as well. And I don't think there are some core things about a person being involved you just can't replace and then expect the soul of the piece to survive.
Okay, fair enough.
Again, now that's an effectivity argument, not a moral argument. There's no moral implications to us replacing the person there with a AI art. It's just whether or not maybe the artist is probably going to deliver a superior product, but that artist is probably also dramatically more expensive than an AI art would you give you, right? So it's the same thing as like shipping it out to India or something for somebody to draw you an art versus some experienced artist. It's going to cost you a lot less to get the guy in India, but you're probably going to get an inferior product. But that doesn't necessarily mean that one person deserves the job versus the other.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Risky Biscuit. Thank you, Polygon. We're going to go ahead and move into our audience questions now. So we're going to be combing through the chat, finding questions people have had, and we'll do that for the next 15 minutes before our closing remarks for the final 10. So Fortune's Favorite says, I wonder what thoughts are on the following topic. Musicians currently are facing DMCA strikes on various platforms by copyright trolls buying audio samples from the same source. What kind of experience do you think artists will face when these copyright trolls generate content from AI models? We'll start with Risky Biscuit.
I mean, it's more of a legal question. I don't know if that's necessarily, again, it's more effectivity. If you're going to have issues using AI because there's all these people that are going to come after you or trigger lawsuits against you, but that doesn't actually speak to the morality of the issue.
So I think it introduces a lot of complications we need to be aware of in terms of, do we deem this acceptable, right? Where people are able to steal things. I think that's the heart of the question is, with the possibility of ownership becoming more blurred, or at least more difficult to prove, is this something that we feel is worth even pursuing? Is this a moralistic thing that we feel is, we're going to say we're willing to tread these waters as a society?
I mean, you could easily probably get a lot of those dismissed in court. I don't think it's going to be too hard to fight against those. And a lot of it's still going to be up in AR just in general for AI art for a while because it's going to take a while for the courts to decide that. But just because something is hard to do or dangerous to do doesn't necessarily mean it's immoral to do.
Okay, fair enough. Polygon Pilgrimage, and your rebuttals.
I'm not really a music expert guy, but I think what I understand you're asking is, if someone can use these tools to create music that would then take away from, the profits or the attention of these other artists, is it something we should allow? And I think in in any in any in any professional pursuit, I think competition is a good thing because it helps to make you better. So I don't think that as long as they're not legally breaking any laws, I really don't think there's anything you could do to stop them. We have the same thing we have in game dev. We run into this all the time of asset flipping, right? The three of us are all working on a game, and you'll say, "Oh, I worked really hard on my game. I put it on Steam, and nobody bought it, but they bought this, piece of crap thing over here that was clearly thrown together with chewing gum and wishes, and people bought that." So there's nothing I can do to stop that, and me getting upset about that isn't going to solve anything. So what I need to do is focus on how can I make a better product? How can I do better at what I'm doing? Or just say I'm doing what I'm doing because I'm having fun doing it, and not worry about that side of it. But as far as being able to legally stop them, no, I don't think you can. I do think competition is good, and then I think that it forces us to evolve and become better. Or sometimes it tells us maybe this isn't for me, and I'm going to move on to something else. But I don't think they're doing anything wrong in that regard. Now, if they were to say using the tools to directly take pieces of music someone else had produced and then like remix it or something and say, now this is mine, now you're getting into a more of a legal and a morality thing, saying you are stealing now. But if it's just generating brand new content and then saying, look, I made this and I'm in this space too, you know that's you can't really stop that, I don't think.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Uh, for our next question, we have Kehadao saying, there are times when I really can't even tell it's a generated art piece. What is the artist's value if they can't justify their value? We'll start with Polygon.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to respond to that. I saw that in the chat, and I'm kind of two ways about that, saying if you can't justify your value, what is your value? I mean, that's kind of a I don't like the way that's said, because that has deeper implications. But from an artistic standpoint, if you're saying, if I offer my services as a 3D modeler, say, and I make a model for you of a truck or whatever, and then you use an AI tool to generate a truck, and you say, well, I'm going to go with the AI tool truck because that serves my needs, and why should I pay this artist to the time spent on this truck? Okay, I mean, I guess once the tools get to that point where they can do that sort of thing effectively, then that's when I need to up my game and say, well, if they can make a truck, then I need to offer truck with, it's unwrapped and it's been cut apart properly to be animated properly or something in order to compete, or I need to move on to something else. Because if the tools can now directly replicate that, then yes, once that becomes prevalent enough, that's what people are going to do, because people are fast, cheap, easy, and lazy. They're going to take it and say, I want this to do this for me. So there you go. It's good enough. I'm going to move forward. So you will see a lot of crapware. Just everything is at the same level where it's all generated quick and easy. And then you'll see a few things at the top echelon that are really crafted with care, with finite precision, with a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and love to create something really special. So there'll be fewer of them because a lot of people are going to get disillusioned. A lot of people, it's hard to keep going when you run into issues and problems and things like that. So I think there's going to be a few really special things and a lot of just, bloatware at the bottom.
Okay. Thank you so much. Risky Biscuit.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say that, like, as somebody providing a service, which what artists are doing, they're providing the service of creating art for somebody, right? If you're doing that commercially, right? If you're just doing it for the sake of art, then you have your own endeavors and you have your own reasons for doing it. But if you're doing it for a commercial reason to sell your art, you're doing it for somebody else, and they need a product, right? And you have no right to like dictate that somebody can't use another version of your product, like a different way to deliver your product, right? That just because you're a person and you're competing against a machine, I don't think allows people to dictate and say, no, you can't use a cheaper solution. You have to use me, the human, right? We've had plenty of situations in the past where they've enforced monopolies or enforced regulatory schemes that did not end up for the betterment of the consumer and the people that were actually trying to make things and innovate things. It just tamped down and made worse things overall. So I think artists that are coming down and saying, that AI art should not be allowed because it outcompetes them in some way. I don't think is moral on their part to say that, because they're depriving others of the potential innovation and creativity that could come from using it.
Okay. Thank you so much. Now, Alistios said, it's like machines in the industrialization period did make thousands of people lose their jobs. Oh, excuse me, this is the wrong comment. Chat has been moving. Main moral issue with AI is simply that fully paid artists did incredible art over the past 100 years, and it's online for AI to use and replace these artists, and remove the possibility for the artist to earn a decent living, since anyone can just Google an image from a prompt and bypass the entire process of paying an artist to do it for them. And then additionally, he makes the point later that if you charge X because your style is very good and not everyone can copy it, but you can copy it with a click, then that can dramatically harm the living of artists. What do you feel about, how will artists maintain their economical standings in that sort of a world? And I'm sorry, I do need to get another bottle. I'll be right back.
I mean, I would say it's not necessarily like it sucks for artists, but it also sucked for the weavers when the machine looms came through. It sucked for the carriage drivers when cars got invented, right? And it's going to suck for truck drivers when AI truck drivers come in. But that doesn't mean that it's immoral for us to use the other option. Just because it hurts artists doesn't mean that we're not looking at the other side, right? The other side is if we only say only human artists are allowed, then we're hurting that other side that could, start generating some art from artists, could doing all those other stuff and making games when they couldn't have done that without the use of AI artists. The other side is that the hundreds of years of art, right? Well, every single artist to this point has been a product of an environment that has had a history of art, right? You would be drawing little caveman stickmen things on cave walls if it had not been for people that came through and drew the things on the cave walls, and then they figured out medieval paintings, which did not have any sort of depth or characterization in that way. And then came periods of artists, right, after another, improving about art and improving about the crafts that you now benefit as, or the artists now benefit generally as a group from that shared history. So why is it immoral for an AI to do that?
Thank you so much, Risky Biscuit. Polygon Pilgrimage, any rebuttal?
Yeah, I actually kind of mostly agree. I think that there's nothing, we're not really touching on or at least I'm not touching on the morality or the legality of these things. But yeah, I do think that every time that, like you said, the weavers got knocked out, a large amount of them got knocked out by the loom, but there are still weavers today, right? And they have evolved, and they're doing different things. They're making handcrafted one of one, like say a super fancy cardigan for some celebrity or something, right? So they're still doing their craft in a different way. They have evolved and changed what they're doing to find a way to either survive in this space, evolve in this space, or move to another space. And I think that's what we're all going to have to do. And that's just a natural part of any profession. There's changes that they make things better or worse, and usually worse for people doing lots of physical labor. We've kind of evolved to a point where we've automated some of that. So now they have to find other jobs. Sometimes it's maintaining and running those things that do that, so you kind of roll with the punches, so to speak.
Okay. Sorry.
Child break. It's okay.
Thank you so much for your thoughts. I think this is being just a fantastic discussion. I feel like we could ask questions all day, and I would love to hear from both of you. Unfortunately, we are restricted by linear space-time. Haven't figured out how to patch that out yet. And we are in our last few minutes. We're going to move to our final remarks. We're going to start with Polygon Pilgrimage. Closing remarks.
I think there's been a lot of good discussion here, and I think most of my issues with this, from being a core artist myself, is the how you define it and how you use it. The intention behind it. And I think so I'm seeing some comments about a good example as composers. Yeah, I think what makes it special is that a person does it. You can go see somebody do it live. The fact that they have the ability to make a mistake, right? And so that's what makes it special and human when you see a really good performance, when you see a really great sports game where they make an incredible catch. It's because it's a human being that did something amazing. And we know it's amazing because we know how much hard work and effort goes into it and how much it takes to get to that point. You know, the people who are at the top of their game. Real quick, I'll share a quick story, the Picasso story. After Picasso became very, very famous for doing all of his work, he was at a cafe and he was just kind of scribbling on the napkin. He did this, you know, to the most of us, which would be an amazing drawing. And this woman asked him if she could have it, and he said, "Oh, yeah, I'll give it to you for, you know, I don't know, $20 or something like that." She goes, "$20? Why would I pay for something that you just, you know, spent no time and effort doing this, you know, this drawing on this paper napkin?" He said, "No, ma'am, this did not take me no time at all. This took me my entire life to be able to do this." You know, that's what it took, was the development of that skill, the time invested in becoming better, evolving from where he was to where he is now, to then say, now I can do it quickly because I have earned that right, because I have built those skills and I have worked really hard. It's, you know, talent is nothing without practice and without, you know, putting yourself through the paces and making yourself better and getting better every day. And so at that point, it's what was impressive about that scribble versus anyone else's scribble was that he had spent the time and dedication to make it something really fantastic. That is a master's work. So that's my real crux of it, is just let's appreciate and respect the intention, the focus of, it's a person putting their effort and time into it, and the emotion and the feeling and the impact into it. Because otherwise, it's, you know, it's a soulless brick. You followed instructions. Yes, you made this thing. You did a fancy collage. Good for you. And again, I use AI stuff all the time for different things, but it's a part of what I create. I don't just say beepity boop, do it. Okay, cool. Look, wasn't I effective today, guys? Because that's not impressive. You know, there's no effort there. So that's sort of my crux of it, is as a person putting in effort and making something with my skill. And that's what I appreciate.
Okay. Thank you so much. We'll go ahead and move to Risky Biscuit. Closing remarks.
Great, thanks. Thanks again for everyone for coming here and chatting and hanging out here. Again, just to read out, my kind of 3 core arguments is that I don't think AI impacts on artists' jobs is an immoral thing. I think it's a thing that happens over history, and that eventually that nets it out for the betterment of humanity. I think that trying to say that AI art is not art may work in the art field of submitting art for art's sake, but I don't think it really is relevant in the game space, where just having art does not make a game, right? We have to take it in, we have to use it in game mechanics, we have to do all these other things. So I don't know if we care necessarily if an AI artist made it or if a real artist made it, as long as it does the job of conveying the world to the gamer. I think that is perfectly acceptable to use it. The last part, I think, about the AI training databases, I think is a really interesting an argument that you can definitely have a long discussion about how it's trained and how it's used. But I have learned some things when I was researching this topic, and that was some things that I find pretty interesting. So I figured I might as well just spend the rest of my time here talking about those. So for AI art training, first of all, AI art trained on art does not actually have any of the source materials of that art kept in its final product. It is used to look at them, right? Like just as any human would have been browsing the internet and have looked at many images. It's used those and is now kind of collectively part of their brain space. But it doesn't actually take those images as a final product. It uses those to train and make predictive models that then are used to create an image. So when people say that they're photo bashing, it's actually not possible because they don't actually know what the photos that they had were originally. They've just been kind of trained on a model, just as any other human kind of gets trained on a model. So that's why it's not actually too unlike how real people learn. They see a bunch of images. You've seen a bunch of images of orcs at some point. And so if someone asks you to draw an orc, you would probably be drawing something approximating what you see as an orc, right? And it's just, that's kind of similar to how the AI works. And you can imagine an AI being an artist that has an incredible technical skill, but is completely lacking in creativity, right? And so we could have people that are like that, right? You have to tell them every single thing that they have to do. Otherwise, they're going to draw it in the most weird way that you could imagine, or just specifically what you write. That's not undifferent from humanity and how people draw. They're just very technical. They don't have the creativity, right? And that's not a reason to say that they're bad, right? It's just how they particularly work as a tool. And then with the AI art, ripped person's art styles. So when we hear a lot of complaints about people ripping off art styles, I don't know necessarily if that's actually a thing that is worth complaining about. People can actually copy other art styles. It may be in bad taste, but there's like nothing criminal about that. There's no reason besides, hey, it leaves a bad taste in your mouth. Well, then maybe the person prompting the AI shouldn't tell them to copy that art style. It's not necessarily the problem with AI itself. It's just the person probably saying, hey, draw me this art thing in this person's style. Well, then you're gonna if you asked an artist to do that, they would probably also similarly give you a similar product that's probably copyrighted or have some moral bad taste in your mouth. That's not AI's problem, that's the person prompting the AI's problem, right? So just criticizing AI art for copying people's art styles isn't really a great thing when we could just not prompt it to copy people's art styles. So as long as you're not saying like, draw me Superman, and expecting that to be okay, well, if you're figuring out drawing like a normal person in a sci-fi universe and doing all these things, well, that's a completely different thing, and you can use that to tweak it as you want, right? I don't think that's immoral. And just because there are edge cases of that immorality, I don't think we should just write it off, right? We shouldn't write off all of diamonds because certain diamonds are made bad, right? We shouldn't write off all of coffee because certain coffee manufacturers mistreated their workers, right? You can think of this for many, many industries. Just because one part of it is bad, and necessarily maybe you disagree with the majority of them as they are now, but that doesn't mean that in the future there won't be better options as the market pushes more for that. And I fully anticipate that in the future, just kind of like how Adobe's coming out with a more ethically sourced database, I'm sure there's going to be more and more of those that come out for commercial protections, and that'll give corporations more interest in joining them because there's not going to be illegal finesse with that type of database. So that kind of concludes my closing remarks, and thanks again for everyone for listening.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay. With that, we're going to take a quick ad break. And during that ad break, I would love for people to kind of write down what are things that they learned, what did they think about, and while that ad break is running, people can throw down maybe things that they hadn't considered before. I'm going to share some of mine. Frankly, I had never thought about the difference between AI-generated code and AI-generated art and how they're pretty similar. And now one of the big questions in my head is, how do we define what is human-touched after AI? Or is it okay for an AI art piece that just nailed it to be it? If it's reviewed and approved by a human, where are the lines? And I think I've obtained a little bit more of a nuanced vision of what that is. Thanks, Daniel. And so I want to say thank you to Risky Biscuit. Thank you, Polygon Pilgrimage. Thank you to all of you in the chat. We're going to run these ads. Throw in your thoughts on what you think. What are the new things that you've been considering over the course of this discussion? And we'll end with what everyone is saying. Thank you so much for being here, everyone. We'll be right back. right, welcome back. Welcome back. Turn off this music here so we can actually hear things. Great. Perfect. So I'm going to call out some of the things that I've been seeing in the chat that I think is fascinating. First off, while people are continuing to send things in, the poll is quite interesting. Pre-debate, we had 7 votes that yes, there is a place for AR in games, and then 3 for no and 3 for it's complicated. And that ratio has shifted much more heavily towards, yes, there is a place for AI art in games, which I think is a very interesting outcome for this. I think a lot of us have kind of, through this discussion, through this back and forth, come to a more nuanced approach that maybe there is a space, but it may be a little bit different than what we thought going into this. And that's really great. Thank you. If AI, this is from Zaft, if AI could produce code that is comparable to someone at my level, I would happily welcome it. And that's a big thing because Zaft is a programmer, right? And that is essentially welcoming in that danger. I know a lot of programmers have been concerned about AI in programming, saying, "Oh, it's gonna completely swap stuff out." Oh, Newell, thank you so much for those gift subs. Thank you.
Starting the hype train by itself.
Yeah, my goodness. Thank you so much. David says, as a programmer, I made my first AI-generated music piece. It was such a pain, but the final result was about 80% of what I wanted. I'm sure a musician could have gotten it to 100%. And that's something that I heard, I think both of you talk about a lot, is that you're going to get to that first 80% pretty quick with AI, but then the final 20% is going to be that 80% of the effort, right? Or even more so. Does that line up with what
you definitely see a lot of art that comes out, and it's just like, well, it looks really awesome, but it's like, oh, it's AI, right? Like, I think it's easy to see that on some degree, but and that's where, you know, if you had the artist with the pure intentionality in that would make it a superior product, but that's not necessarily, you know, the moral issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Polygon.
Yeah, Polygon, thank you so much. My heavens. Thank you, sir. Let's see, what else have people been saying in here that is quite interesting? Talking about how much it's a productivity multiplier, which is interesting because that kind of has the implication that we are taking the stance that an artist will be able to leverage AI in order to become a better, more productive artist, not in order to replace an artist. And that's something that I've considered for a good amount of time. You know, my wife is an illustrator. She made, you know, pieces like this, right, that are pretty darn high quality. She's published, and that's kind of where I stand, is that the artist jobs it's going to replace are probably the jobs that she wouldn't want to take in the first place. Right? It's people saying, "Can you illustrate my book? My budget is like $20 and I'll give you 5% of the Kickstarter earnings." Like, you know, it's very risky. And so there is something to be said for, are these jobs people would even want?
There's an interesting story about an anime that got created, or there was like a short film anime. And the guy didn't have any funds. He had just like written a story by himself. I think he had written a book maybe beforehand. And there was basically just no way that he would have been able to make this film without the use of AI. And he still used a lot of, you know, more of the ethical kind of solutions of it and stuff. But yeah, it wouldn't have been possible without that, right? And so we're better for it, I think, in that aspect. No artist would have accepted the pay that he could give them, basically, right?
Yeah. And it's interesting because that's a good point, where even we can even see this on the macro scale of people like Mr. Beast, who, if they charged what their videos were worth for sponsors, they literally could not get sponsors. Like, Apple would not be able to afford their entire marketing budget for a single Mr. Beast video. So there are some more complex economics here. I think K Headout brings up a really good point of, I think this is a really good argument against LLM, the fact that it can get you 80% of the way there really quickly, because it will hinder innovation as a whole in the industry, because you get 80% of the way forward, like in that computer-generated direction. And so theoretically, it's going to be kind of converging for that first 80%, and then only in that last 20% would innovation happen. I think that's an interesting point.
You know, I have an example, a practical example of something I did for work recently. is I used AI to help me generate an algorithm for running automatic checks on our peer review code. So we write code at
Mm,
work with Python, and then we say, I need a way to sort of peer review this quickly, right?
yeah.
So one of the things I used it for was to take away the tedious, to say,
Mm,
if I've defined a variable at the top, have I used it somewhere in the code? And so I knew what I wanted to do, and it was quite complicated to explain or maybe to figure out. So I typed in the prompt and kind of crafted it to say, give me a framework that I can take that and run with it. So that kind of helps. If you know intellectually what the problem is, you know how
yeah.
to define it. I know that I can sit here and kind of tediously take my time in a whole day or two to kind of work this out, or in a few seconds I could type, I'm trying to do this and it's very iterative and I need to do this. Then tell me how to kind of get there, and then once you show me the path, okay, thanks, I got it, and I'll go do the rest. That's totally fine. But if I were to just say, write my code for me, whatever, and then just throw it in there and say, yep, it's done, it's obviously not done, because it has problems with a lot of things that you look at and you need to fix. Another thing I
Mm,
use it for also is to sort of purposely train my coding skills. Is I will tell it to write a script that I know I can create myself, that I know I've done several times, and I'll look at what it gives me and I'll look for the problems, because then
mm.
that it's going to generate something and go, this should work. Copy paste it in Unity, it'll work. And I look at it and go, oh no, you missed the definition there. Oh no, that's not iterating correctly. So it's a good practice tool too. So
Uh,
another way to use it.
that's an interesting.
One thing I would, I
Sorry,
guess,
real quick.
sorry, can you,
That I think that's an interesting thought, and it almost makes me wonder if you could do the same thing in the art world of generate me an image with some flaws. Now I have to go in and fix it. I don't exactly know which industry that would be incredibly helpful for, but I think it's a really interesting exercise. Risky, you were saying.
yeah. So on the 80% problem, I think this is kind of similar to like how game engines now are prevalent in the industry, right? Before, you had to know how to make a physics engine. You had to know how to render things onto the screen. I think people are just going to shift their skills to the polishing level of the art end, right? That's what they're going to spend their time on. And there was like some of the fun, like the things that the AI does well are going to be less needed, right? So now I don't need to know how to physically program things. Maybe that's useful when there's a very specific physics problem that maybe the Unity engine doesn't do well. That knowing that would help, right? Just as a someone really did
Yeah,
a lot of stuff
geez.
there.
Thank you so much, Dex Leon. Appreciate it. Thank you, thank you.
Yeah, but just getting to finish off that it's just like you're gonna shift your knowledge base, and people are just gonna be really, really proficient now at finessing that last little 20%. I don't think there's still probably gonna be room for people that are really smart and knowing about that other 80%, but I don't think you need to now know all that 80% to make something good, right?
Mm.
But it may make you still better.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. There's just a couple more points I want to follow up with here in chat, and then we'll wrap up. Give you guys an opportunity to share where people can find you once again. Zaf says, I think there's a real risk of it stopping people from being beginners in many fields. It might create a drought of experts at some point because 80% is a lot better than what a beginner would produce. But then I think the demand or incentive would shift back to people learning those crafts again. Alistios said, the issue with any tools is that they will be weaponized for the corporate's greed and against labor force, while all the money saved from those tools won't be given back to the workforce or the customer, but added into the rich people's pockets as more profit. And I think these are very fair and interesting points. And I think that's why this is such a complex issue, is because it's not the exact same thing that we saw with factory automation in the industrial age, right? This is a more nuanced issue. It's a little more difficult. So I want to thank everyone for coming out here and giving us their thoughts and contributing to what could be a difficult discussion. I want to echo what Polygon Pilgrimage threw in the chat. Thank you, everyone, for keeping this a civil discussion where we're able to really exchange ideas and view things from a more well-rounded perspective. That's exactly what we're hoping to do here. So thank you. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and wrap on up. Polygon Pilgrimage, do you want to give us a little outro for yourself? Once again, where can people find you? What are you up to?
Sure. Yeah. So again, echoing what Risky said. Yeah. Thank you so much for putting this together. Really appreciate hanging out with everybody and having a nice discussion. So you can find me on Twitch Tuesdays and Thursdays from 6 to 8 p.m. EST. I am the Polygon Pilgrimage. That's the at. And also on Instagram, I'm sharing some things there. And I'm in the process of moving over to a new account for my newly formed company. which is Paws and Play Studios. Paws like cat paws, because we're big animal people over here. So yeah, we'll be doing on Twitch at the Polygon Pilgrimage, and then on Instagram as well. Those are the core ways. I also have Discord. You guys can find me and add me or whatever, and I'll be happy to help you guys. And I'm always open to help people learn game development in any form, 3D modeling, whatever. I don't care what your engine is. I'm there to help you, and even just rubber duck if that's all I can do. But I just want to help everybody grow and succeed. So thank you for having me, and let's continue on with that.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Polygon. Thank you for your insightful thoughts and comments here today. Risky Biscuit, once again, where can people find you? What are you up to?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so you can find me at Risky Biscuit Games on Twitch. I have a YouTube, but I don't really post there as much. But mainly it's on Twitch. And I'm making a game called SOS Forgotten Planet, which is a educational horror game that teaches you Morse code, which is on Steam. And if you want to try out the demo, you can try it out there. Thanks again for the really awesome discussion and all the ideas and things that people have shot out there. It's been pretty fun and entertaining. So thanks again.
Perfect. Thank you so much, both of you. I've got about 30 seconds before I can shout you out here. Risky Biscuit. Those cooldowns are brutal. But this has been absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much. As a reminder, Fox Hollow Games, for anyone who is new here on Twitch or YouTube, Fox Hollow Games is a charitable enterprise helping people enter the game industry. So we do debates like this. We do interviews. We have an interview coming up with JD Does Dev about his experience working in the game industry, about making a horror game live on Twitch. It's going to be a really interesting discussion. Be sure to tune in for that on Monday. We'll have the time worked out soon. Keep an eye on Discord for the official announcement. Join our Discord. Like, follow, subscribe wherever you're at. We do game development. We do game analysis. All sorts of things. Thank you so much to everyone for being here. I hope you've had a lovely, lovely Saturday. And there we go. There's the shout out to Risky Biscuit. With that being said, we're going to say farewell to our fine debate participants. Thank you so much for being the brave first, the first penguins on this little adventure. And we're going to go raid into Two Nerdy Nerds. We're going to go hang out with them. They are building their finished product for their cat cafe management game. They're cruising on it. They're doing really great work. We're going to go hang out with them. Thank you so much, everyone, for hanging out here today. I know I've been personally enriched by it. I hope you all have as well. Thanks, David. Thanks, Mothman. Thanks, Kayadao. Thanks, Alistios. Thank you so much. Appreciate you all. Have a great rest of your weekend.
Where did they